Hey, this is Ree here. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate all of you. Today, we're going to talk about Justin Trudeau, what's happening with Justin Trudeau. And this is actually not so much about him, but more about how we can use astrology and many different techniques at once to discover who a person really is and what they will become and when they will become such person. Om Klim Kalike Namaha. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing. It really helps me a lot. Don't forget to check out my website, paradoxastrology.com. Book your consultation today. I can help you with anything. And if you would like more exclusive occult videos that I don't post on YouTube, consider subscribing to my Patreon. It also helps to support this channel. Okay, let's get into this video. The reason I wanted to make this video is because Justin Trudeau used to be very popular, and as of the last few years or so, everything declined. He's actually becoming one of the most hated people in the world. So how does that happen? How can we see that? Through the transits and through the dasha system. One thing we can learn is, how do we come to the height of our success? Well, he became prime minister on November 4th, 2015. Now there's a dasha system, which is Chara dasha. So if we look at the Chara dasha system, he was in Capricorn, Pisces. Now Capricorn is the government. Capricorn is his 6th house in his birth chart, which is work. And it's also daily routines. The Lord of Capricorn is Saturn, which is in the 4th house, which is also aspecting the 6th house. And the 6th house, which is Capricorn, has the 10th house Lord in it, which is showing us that in this dasha would be a lot about his routine, his daily activities, his work, his career, his public image would change. And he also has Rahu in the 6th house next to Venus, which amplifies your public image. So it's almost like having Rahu in the 10th house because it's conjunct the 10th house Lord. So that can make someone very famous, and it's well placed in Capricorn. And then on this date, he actually had Jupiter transiting the 1st house, which gives us a lot of good luck and expands our identity and who we really are. Now, at that time, Ketu was in Pisces and Rahu was in Virgo. Virgo is his 2nd house. So that can give us sudden, huge gains in money, as Rahu does very well in Virgo. Now, Ketu was conjunct his natal Mars in the 8th house of transformation, which is the 4th house Lord of the home and country. So there's a huge transformation about who he is, because it's also conjunct his moon in the home country, and it's also the 9th house Lord of law and parliament. So something to do with law, and the hometown would significantly change him, and he became prime minister. When we look at the Vimshotri dasha, he was in Moon, Jupiter, Mahadasha. Now Moon is in his 8th house with Mars, like I said, but there is actually a mutual exchange between Moon and Jupiter. So between the 8th house and the 4th house, which creates a yoga that is actually very powerful. And the 4th house aspects the 10th house of reputation. So it was showing that during this dasha would expand his reputation in the world. So this is why it's very important to look at more than one dasha to figure out what is going to happen to this person. So the Vimshotri dasha has to do with your moon and the nakshatra of the moon, but then the Chara dasha has to do with your ascendant, and I'll make videos about that coming up soon. Moon is actually his Amatya Karaka, which means that it is a representation of his career. So he was actually in the dasha of his career. So when we get into the dasha of our career, it shows that we're going to hit the heights of our career, or we will find our career. But what was significant also is that Jupiter is his Atmakarka, which is the significator of his soul purpose. So he was in the dasha of the career, and the soul purpose came together, and then that's when he became prime minister. So when you go through these dashas, that will hit a huge focal point in your life. And not everyone hits that. Not everyone will be in the dasha of these two planets, because sometimes we don't live long enough for that to happen, or it happened when we were too young, so we didn't get to experience that. So it's very significant when you do get to go through this period. So why is it that his approval rating is going down now? Well, he actually changed dashas. On November 6, 2022, he changed dashas from Moon to Mars dasha. Now, Mars is a representation of his Darakarka, which is the wife or the spouse, the wife for him. So in Mars Rahu dasha, and his natal Rahu is in the 6th house, like I said. So it was in Mars Rahu Saturn dasha, and Saturn is his 7th house lord, and his natal Saturn is in the 10th house, showing this dasha would affect his reputation. So we have Mars, which is the spouse, Rahu, unexpected conflicts, and then Saturn affecting his reputation. And on August 2nd, 2023, him and his wife announced that they were splitting up. So this is when Saturn went retrograde on top of his descendant. So Saturn is the lord of his 6th house of conflicts, and Venus was retrograding in his 5th house. So rethinking matters of love and relationships. His natal Mars is in the 8th house, which is the house of divorce. So when you would look at that at the chart, and there's many other things that you have to do. There's other charts that you have to look at. You have to look at the D9, you have to look at the birth chart, the D12, the D60, the D10, right? There's a lot of different charts, but I'm just minimizing this, and there's other dashas as well. But just to simplify this, you could look at and see the Darakarka is in the 8th house. So during Mars dasha, if he's old enough, and you could see the chart that there's going to be something to do with his spouse, and then you could look at this Mars Rahu Saturn and be like, okay, yeah, there's a possibility of divorce here. And you could see that from when he was a child. Now Rahu is in his 9th house, aspecting the 1st house at that time. Rahu makes us change and go usually our own way. So it was showing that. And Ketu was in Libra, and Libra is a representation of relationships. Ketu is a split, aspecting Saturn in the 7th house. When Ketu and Saturn comes together, it means there's a loss. There's some kind of ending. It could be career, it can be relationship, depending on your chart. But it was his 7th house, so that's relationships. And that's where transiting Saturn was as well, retrograding. And on that day, we had the sun, which is his ascendant lord, was conjunct Ketu in the 12th house. And his ascendant is also in Cancer in the D9. So it was showing that there would be some kind of loss that would alter who he is as a person and how he presents himself in the world. So you can see that this dasha revealed itself very early through the transit. So that's why it's very important that you look at the dasha to see what's going to happen. But then you also have to look at the transits to see if that's possible of happening during that time period. So there's multiple things that you have to look at to predict. So Mars is enemies. So we have never seen so many people turn against him. And as soon as this dasha changed, people started turning against him. His Mars is in the 2nd house in the D9, which is aspecting Saturn and Jupiter in the 9th house. Legal conflicts with family, relationships, and law, people overseas. He has a lot of trouble with people in the governments overseas, especially. Now, this Mars brings in opposition into our lives, because this is us having to compete or fight. So what came about that was Pierre Poilievre, which is the opposite for the conservatives. Trudeau is a liberal, and then Pierre Poilievre is a conservative. And I'm sure Pierre Poilievre has been around this whole time, but he just became bigger. As soon as he got into the Mars dasha, he became more popular. So it kind of gave more strength to his enemies. Now it's in his 8th house. So these were secret enemies. So they've been around, but then they come to the forefront at that time. And there's also a mutual exchange with Mars and Jupiter in the 4th house. So these enemies will come from the homelands and from the 9th house of foreign places, foreign enemies. Mars is also aspecting the 11th house, which can create a transformation, death, rebirth with his alliances, group, social circles during this dasha. And that remains to be seen because there's still a lot of time left. The 2nd house and the 3rd house, it aspects, which is money and family. It must transform or die off, the money and the family. And the way he communicates changes and makes him more aggressive. And we definitely did see that. We saw that during COVID too in Moon Dasha, because Mars is conjunct the Moon, but this amplified it as he went into the Dasha. This can also cause problems while traveling, because Mars is aspecting the 3rd house. That could be accidents, incidents, problems, enemies. And on September 26th of 2023, his plane was grounded in India following an investigation dealing with drugs. And he should be cautious also of accidents twice there's problems, they say, with his plane that were reported. And so traveling problems, mechanical problems. In conclusion, this is how the dashas can change your entire life. So the dashas are periods of time. And when we go into a different period of time that's ruled by a different planet, everything changes. And this is why it's important to understand this knowledge in ourselves. The degree it changes will depend on your birth chart. Like him, he went from a dasha of the planet in the same house to another dasha of a planet of the same house, and then it changed slightly. But sometimes people change the planet and the house, and then everything changes. And then we also have to look at the divisional charts as well to see these changes, and the other divisional charts to see if the karma can bring these things to fruition. So this is just a very basic example of how you can use the dashas, the karakas, the transits, and so on in order to predict someone's future. I'll have a video coming up about who will become the next Prime Minister of Canada next year. So that's just a little bit about that. I thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you in the next one.